I think anytime you're trying to navigate passively and you have that sort of marginal portion of your range, the entire thing kind of becomes unfeasibly complicated if we don't have an accurate idea of the type of range that we're actually up against, right? Because ultimately, the range that we're up against and the distribution of hands within that range is going to entirely determine whether or not our hand is actually going to make any money, right? So what I would start with here is to always be recognizing where the threshold is of hands that your opponent can bet for value or will bet for value, right? Because a lot of people start with trying to establish right off the bat bluffing frequencies or bluffing tendencies or things like that, right? But in fact, a lot of the time you kind of have to do it in the inverse way, and you have to start with, I need to establish what my opponent's value threshold is in order to establish where the bluffs are coming from. And that value threshold in any given spot is going to be fairly different. But what you will find is that almost invariably, the opponents that you're most likely going to be up against in the games that you're playing are going to be really struggling to do any kind of thin value betting, because they're not going to expect you to, bluff catch really light or continue in creative sort of ways with marginal hands. They're not going to expect to be able to get thin value just simply by virtue of the fact that they kind of recognize themselves that they are not really bluffing very much. And so they know they can't give you that much of an incentive to pay off significantly. So they almost start only value betting with very, very strong hands. And there's kind of a dynamic that goes on around that as well. So I think that process of establishing where that value threshold lies is basically the most fundamental part of this.